Well, hello, everybody. We have about 8 or 9 days left in our Ultimate Transformation Challenge. We're about 6.5 weeks in. I learned a lot of information so far. The last several days, I talked a lot about the gut microbiome. I've referenced several mouse studies, both in my book, Chasing 22, as well as sent you guys links to research to investigate, some TED Talks to listen to. Wrapping your mind around what's happening in those mouse studies are important. Just to reiterate, the main things that I want you to get out of that is that the gut microbiome really matters. And when we look at things like fecal transplants, when we look at the epigenetic studies that I referenced with these mice, we can see that something's happening with microbes and the gut microbiome. Lots more to say about that. And then I sent you guys the research the other day about what we eat, how it influences our genes. I will, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, put the links to these talks in the description of the video, as well as my book, Chasing 22, available on Amazon, as well as anything else relevant that I find to these mouse studies, epigenetics, microbes, etc. That is a prerequisite to hearing those things, reading those things, and understanding those things before we go into today's topic. Those of you that have been doing the program, I talked a lot about digestion, how to fix your digestion. And if you did not fall into these baskets, you notice that these things didn't make your digestion better. For 90% of you, it always does make your digestion better. I tell you what to do, you do it, and you're like, man, oh man, my digestion's never been better. Usually takes about a week or two because of the law of cure. We talked about that. Some people call it the paradoxical effect. There's lots of different names for it, meaning you tend to get worse before you get better. All of the explanations for that were given to you guys as well, but that's normal. Well, once your body regulates, you do the things we've been telling you to do, all of a sudden your digestion system cleans up. Those of you that fall into categories that you're not getting better, I ask very specific questions. Sometimes it comes down to literally a sulfur imbalance in your gut. Sometimes it's other methane-based gases in your gut. There's other things that can be going on. So I'll ask you guys, is it more diarrhea? Are you more constipated? Have you ever had abdominal surgeries? Blah, blah, blah. Ask a bunch of questions. Ask you if you have pain in particular areas of your stomach, if it's in your upper right, lower left, etc., etc. Do you have GERD? Do you have this? Do you have that? The point is, go through a lot of questions before I say, try these things. And then 90% of the time, I'll help those people as well. The 10% that can't be fixed tend to be the people that have had very, very long-term problems that never did anything about it, or they have a mechanical issue going on, meaning like physiologically there's something going on with their stomach, whether it's severe hiatal hernia or they have colitis or whatever it is going on. There's ways to alleviate some of that discomfort and pain, but it's sort of a crutch that you have to have for the rest of your life. I say all those things because if you still fall into the basket of somebody that is not having at least one very normal bowel movement every day, that's a problem. It's not okay to go every 3 days or every 4 days. It's not okay to spend 15 minutes going to the bathroom trying to pass a bowel movement. It's not normal. All of these things are related to the topic of your gut microbiome. Because remember, you are mostly microbial, and those microbes live mostly on the tube that goes from your mouth down to your anus. The large majority of them live in your colon. They all have very specific jobs. And my main point to you guys has been that the ratio of these microbes matter and where they are matter. Meaning, if the bacteria that are in your colon are in your mouth or throat, as disgusting as that sounds, that's a problem. That's not where they belong. But the truth is, along this approximately 30-foot tube that goes from your mouth to your anus, these microbes can move around in different ways. The term SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth, means that the bacteria that belong in your large intestine have migrated up to your small intestine, and this creates a host of problems. How does it happen? Who does it happen to? We can speculate all day. There seem to be things that map onto SIBO. What I will tell you guys, and I assure you of this, is the longer you have digestive issues, whatever they may be, the more likely you are to have other digestive issues. And the more likely you are to have autoimmune diseases, which come mostly through your gut. They come mostly through your gut, meaning that as soon as the gut lining is compromised, the mucal lining that lines your gut, that the bacteria will always prefer to eat short-chain fatty acids, butyrate being one of these. There are other things that the gut can eat if you don't have a butyrate-based, like a fiber-based diet. Why fiber? Fiber breaks down, it literally ferments into butyrate. You can also have straight butyrate, like ghee butter is straight butyrate. But if you're somebody that is, for example, following a carnivore diet, your body can actually eat different forms of fatty acids, but that's neither here or there. My point is that if you create a circumstance where the microbes start eating at the gut lining, that's a problem, because that gut lining is literally thinner than a human hair. The microbes can get into the bloodstream. And what is the definition of an autoimmune disease? It is your body's attacking itself. So as soon as the body sees these things don't belong here, your body can begin this process. There are lots of reasons that autoimmune disease can occur, but it's almost always the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back. I will also link for you guys a recent video. It's about 3 hours long that talks about T cells. There's another, and the reason why I started listening to this is because somebody else doing the UTC, it's fun when people interact with me, we can learn together. But I went through this as well, talking about T cells and autoimmune disease, and then I did some more research on my own, and it's about 3 hours long. I don't know how many people are interested in listening to this, but it is something that in the first half of the video, you really do need to watch the video because there's graphics. It's a lot of biology in order to understand it, but I will assure you that T cells are very, very responsible for autoimmune responses. And it turns out that T cells are very important for the response to anything in the body that's going wrong. But what you don't want is an over response. You want the right response. And that's what we see with COVID and in relation to COVID. So it turns out that a lot of your T cells, the health of these T cells and their ability to respond, develop a lot in childhood. And that's what I want to talk about right now and lead you into a larger discussion. That preamble was kind of long to make this point here, but hopefully you guys understand that we only have control of what we have control over right now. How we raise our children and the choices that we make has been a large push of what I've been trying to get through to you guys this entire 6.5 weeks. Is it's not just about you. It's about how we raise our kids, the choices we make when they're very young. And unfortunately, these are conversations that nobody has. We know better. We know the cost, for example, of a C-section and what we should do when there's a C-section. We have better evidence of what happens. We know that children that are born from C-sections are way more likely to have certain immune issues as they get older. Why would that be? I'll give you a hint. It's microbial. The first exposure that a child has as soon as they enter the world is through the mother's vagina, which is filled with very particular microbes. And when we see that when we remove a child via C-section, which is not through the mother's vagina and her natural microbes, and instead it's a hospital room, we see that there's a problem. So what we've started to do, or certain hospitals have started to do, is they literally take like a cheesecloth, wipe the mother's vagina, wrap the baby immediately in this cloth, and what we see are better outcomes for these children. Again, this is a microbe issue starting when? at literally childbirth. Does it have something to do with T cell development as well? I'll guarantee it, because all you have to do is read the research that I'm sending to you guys, listen to the T cell experts who have the PhDs, and understand how the T cells develop, understand how microbes develop, and look at what happens to children when they're born via C-section and those who aren't. There's a clear link here. Microbes matter. So I say this because how do you think a child's immune system develops? That it is the use it or lose it principle. It's use it or lose it, meaning a child should get sick. A child should have the opportunity to run the normal fever. What has been our biggest mistake over the past 30 years, 40 years? As soon as the child has anything wrong, we immediately bring them to the doctor and it's antibiotics, antibiotics, antibiotics. Most doctors now are getting away with that. But the generation of like my kids growing up, they got antibiotics for everything. And until I learned better, I stopped doing that. It's very normal for a child to run a fever. I went through all of the research with you guys going back into the 1920s about steam rooms and saunas. Dr. Roger Schwelt talking about literally the Nobel Peace Prize was given. You have a Nobel Prize being given for the research in sauna therapy. Why? Because it's so staggeringly effective. Your body runs its own sauna when it gets sick. Okay, why am I saying this? Again, keep in context, because it is the baby. As they grow, they need the opportunity to build an immune system and not rely on Tylenol, antibiotics, and everything else. It's the same thing, though, for cleanliness. Once again, I mean, here we go. It's going to be, what are you trying to say, Tom? Well, listen to what the fuck I'm trying to say. Ask yourself this question. Hundreds of thousands of years evolving on this planet. Okay, what the fuck were babies doing? Were we Purelling them? Were we putting them in the kitchen sink? Or were they crawling around on what's called the ground as they got older? Okay, is it the former or the latter? Obviously, we were meant to evolve outside in nature, crawling on the ground, interacting with the ground, and what are called bacteria and natural, dirtiness outside. We were around animals. We were not bathing every day. It was a luxury to bathe every day. Now, I'm not telling you to not bathe every day. I'm telling you that we have become hyper clean, especially during COVID. Those of you that listened to me 2 years ago, I said, I predict that you're going to see a ridiculous spike in autoimmune diseases occurring during COVID. My reasoning wasn't just because of people assumed that I was saying, oh, it's the vaccines that causing, or it's COVID causing it. No, that's one reason. And by the way, that's already being confirmed, that COVID does in fact spike autoimmune diseases via the T cell response. And that's in the research that I'll link in the description. Vaccines have well been known to cause autoimmune diseases in some people, that regardless of the COVID-19 vaccine. That's well known because, again, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. I wasn't saying it for that. I was saying it because of the hyper cleanliness of what we're doing. Because that again, back in the 1980s, I can't remember the guy's name, somebody in England recognized that, wow, there's a correlation between hyper cleanliness and autoimmune disease. And he did this by looking at older and younger siblings and how they were treated. And he recognized that the second born would have a much better immune system than the firstborn, because it's always your firstborn where you're running around after them, helicopter parenting. Right? By the time the second, third, fourth one are born, you don't have the time. Like you kind of learn better. The other one is messing around with it a lot more. The other child is messing around with the baby a lot more. There's more interaction. And this was a fairly controlled study. And then after that speculation came out, more research was done, and it seemed to have this very interesting hypothesis emerge where, wow, you know what, it makes sense. But it makes sense in the context of the use it or lose it principle. Map that onto the amount of stress that we were under during COVID, the social isolation, the hyper cleanliness, you create a lot of stress, a lot of social anxiety. You have the COVID itself, you have the vaccines. That's a lot of straws on the camel's back. Women are especially prone to it. Then you add on the alcohol abuse during COVID, the amount of weight people put on during COVID. You create metabolic dysfunction. It's a cascade of bad events. And sure enough, one of the things that you'll see below that I'm linking is, in fact, exactly what I was saying 2 years ago. Here come the autoimmune diseases. So, guys, the video is getting a little long. I'll cover what I was actually going to cover the second part tomorrow. But I do just want you to recognize that, we need the right amount of everything. We need the right amount of everything. The time, it's just like the Nike Free shoes. The Nike Frees are great. But if you're going to go out and just train in the Nike Frees, your feet and your knees are going to hurt tomorrow. The Nike Frees they're designed to titrate up. They're designed to titrate up. You don't immediately start running barefoot and doing things barefoot. Which is great. Again, we were evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to not have shoes on our feet. How many ankle surgeries and knee surgeries were happening 10,000, 20,000 years ago? But that was the whole point of the Nike Free movement. The Nike Frees came out because they realized these third world countries, they don't have knee or ankle problems. And it turns out that the health and the strength and the mobility of your foot really matter. So they tried to give these Nike Frees to the runners over in the University of Oregon, and they all got fucked up. Why? Because they didn't titrate up correctly. Well, it's the same thing with your digestive system, your immune system, and everything else. You have to do things slowly and steadily over time. How can we do that? What can we do? You start with your digestion. You start with some of the breathing techniques I talked about. Your parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest system. You start with the things that were covered in the UTC that we meticulously went over. And then from there, you can start experimenting with certain things that we'll cover tomorrow. Okay, guys, have a great rest of the day.